The election in Brazil is mostly over. I say mostly because Bolsonaro, who is the current president and who lost, has not yet addressed the nation, resulting in truckers blocking over 300 highways. Now, the Supreme Court in Brazil is ordering the police to stop these blockades. Over at War Room with Steve Bannon and over on InfoWars, they're saying that the election was stolen. Now, I don't know a whole lot about what's going on with Brazilian politics, but this is actually really interesting, especially as U.S. personalities are commenting on it, how many people feel about World Economic Forum versus nationalism, and this story. Here's the simple version. Bolsonaro won overwhelming support in several key areas and then lost in one major populous area, thus giving him the edge in the vote. This has resulted in widespread unrest, and some are even calling for a military coup to resist communism. You know, I'll tell you right now, I don't know a whole lot about Brazilian politics. It's just be completely honest with you guys. But the reason this is so important is that it's not too dissimilar to what we saw in the early 1900s with some countries when you got military coups taking over and then creating a kind of military dictatorship. How do you solve for these problems, man? I don't know, because even if you are someone who really does believe this was stolen, you have to understand there's deep instability in this. That if you want to believe that the election was not legitimate, and I don't know anything about Brazilian politics. Say, look, I hear a lot of arguments. I'm not a Brazilian, politico. The country is completely destabilizing. And you know what's funny? It's kind of true here for the United States. A lot of what's being claimed in Brazil echoes what we heard in the United States. You have people saying this is clearly national interests versus international interests. Now, as a funny aside, they're arguing the word globalist is anti-Semitic and you're not allowed to say it. They've been arguing that for a few years now. It's ridiculous. It's a word that literally means someone who wants a one world government and has nothing to do with Jewish people. But what does that say about you? The organizations that claim it is anti-Semitic. What are you claiming about Jewish people? That's just the weirdest thing. Whatever. I'll just say internationalist agenda. How about that? Here's the first story. And then I've got to show you the important breakdown from Media Matters. Ah, yes, our good friends over at Media Matters, breaking down Steve Bannon leading baseless right-wing media claims that Brazil's election was rigged. Well, right now, unrest is escalating. Videos of fire. And that's getting crazy. Here's a story from The Guardian. Brazil judge orders police to clear roadblocks by pro-Bolsonaro truckers. Far-right president remains silent as supporters protest against his election defeat by Lula da Silva. They say the Federal Highway Police said truckers were blocking highways at 271 points, partially or fully, as part of protests that have spread to 23 of Brazil's 26 states in the wake of Bolsonaro's loss to Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva in a runoff election on Sunday. The police said another 192 roadblocks had been cleared. So we're looking at almost 400. Justice Alexander de Moraes called on the PRF to remove all the blockades, which have been mainly organized by truckers, a core constituency of the Bolsonaro government that has benefited from its lowering of diesel costs. Some truckers posted video calling for a military coup to stop Lula, a leftist who served as Brazil's president from 2003 to 2010, from taking office. Bolsonaro remained silent for more than 36 hours after his defeat and has neither conceded the race nor called the president-elect. Moraes was quickly joined by 6 other justices in a virtual session in the early hours of Tuesday as they formed a majority in the 11-member court to back his decision, setting fines for the PRF's Director General, Silvane Vasquez, if he failed to act to clear the roadblocks. The highways that have been blocked included key roads used to move grains from farm states to ports, as well as a major road linking the 2 largest cities, Rio and Sao Paulo. The main access road to Sao Paulo's Guarulhos, probably pronouncing it wrong, International Airport, the busiest in the country, was also blocked. Although Bolsonaro has remained silent on his election loss, his political allies and associates have already begun to establish contact with the Lula camp to discuss a transition. Some have publicly declared that the Bolsonaro government should respect the election results. The communications minister, Fabio Faria, told Reuters that Bolsonaro was expected to speak on his defeat by Tuesday though it was not clear whether the incumbent would accept Lula's victory. I am going to bet largely he does. You can go ahead and believe whatever you want. I think the strongest possibility is he just says we lost. You have to think about this. It's tough. It's tough. I'm not going to sit here and try and pretend like I could give you any understanding of Brazil's politics, what areas are corrupt or not. Obviously, people are losing. They're crying foul. When Hillary Clinton lost, she cried foul. When Trump lost, Trump supporters cried foul. Now, we know in the United States, there's information manipulation and procedural arguments about our elections. That's normal, but it's getting a bit crazy. Thus, many people are saying, well, I'll put it rather simply, I suppose. We now know the DHS, the federal government, was colluding with big tech to subvert public perception, to manipulate and manufacture consent. Now, I don't know much about what's going on in Brazil, but I suppose it could be similar. And that means you're going to get, let me say this, because this is a difficult subject. What's happening now in the United States is that the left is losing. So whatever you want to believe, in the end, they're losing. Joe Rogan just came out and said the red wave in next week is going to look like the doors opening in The Shining. There is only so much you can do to try and control the mind of the population. But if they have access to information, they will break free. A lot of people are highlighting this. And let's see. I don't know if they have the image in here on Media Matters. There's a picture. OK, they don't. But we'll read through some of what people are saying. There's a picture of a Lula rally with like 100 people and a Bolsonaro rally with like tens of thousands. And they're saying it's very much like, Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Here's what I want to say. On the surface, I think it's actually kind of simple. If you have a lot of people who are fervent and in support of a president, but you have a lot of people who are mindlessly marching in lockstep with the media as they lie, don't be surprised when the people who are paying attention don't win. The people in the United States overwhelmingly voted against Donald Trump. I talk to people. I go to cities. The issue, I believe, and I can just say this. To say, whatever to the past 2 years, right now, what's happening with this week? When you have these massive rallies, that shows you the tide is shifting. And they may try to manipulate the public, those who are indifferent or don't pay attention, but it only works for so long. If they want to raise gas prices, fight climate change, shut down fossil fuels, eventually people are forced to wake up and they get angry. Here's the story from Media Matters. Let's read. Steve Bannon leads baseless right-wing media claims that Brazil's election was rigged. Heavens. Let's see what they said. Echoing baseless fraud claims from the first round of voting in Brazil's elections, Steve Bannon and other right-wing media personalities reacted to the news of Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro's loss by claiming there was electoral fraud and urging him not to concede. Now, see, look, I got to say, you come out with this fraud narrative. What's the evidence? Fair, honest question. It literally just happened. Is there hard evidence? Is there anything we're not seeing? I mean, there's some questionable metrics, I suppose, but nothing definitive. But we'll see, right? As of Tuesday morning, Bolsonaro has not spoken publicly. The New York Times reported on Tuesday morning that Bolsonaro has not yet determined what he would do. His son Flavio told his followers on Twitter to not give up on our Brazil. Pro-Bolsonaro protests spread through the country. This we know. Quote, he cannot concede. Impossible, Bannon said in a Getter live stream on Sunday evening after the race had been called for Bolsonaro's opponent, Lula. Screw Biden. Screw the State Department. Screw the CIA. F them. Here's what Bannon posted. Make up your own mind. Lula stole the election. Now, what's the reasoning for believing that? You have in many different regions, Bolsonaro won the majority, but slightly. And then in Nordeste, I pronounce it, Bolsonaro lost. Okay, now a lot of people on the right are saying that region is corrupt. It's got gangs and drug dealers and all that stuff. Maybe. Or maybe it's a very densely populated urban center. And I don't think Brazil has an electoral college system. So if it looks like you've got 3 districts, 3 states, and it's like 54, 53 or whatever percent, and then he loses the most populous one with 31%, it's just population density. All I can really say to this is take it with a grain of salt. dig into it, see what's up. And the Electoral College is very, very important. Steve Bannon says Bolsonaro has not conceded. InfoWars host Alex Jones also denied that Bolsonaro lost the election and then called for Brazil's military to carry out a coup. Bolsonaro is widely popular, probably won by 20 points, Jones said, adding that his options were either escaping or he can go with the military and stand up to this communist takeover. Look, I don't know exactly why. I'll put it this way. I don't trust Media Matters, to be completely honest. And I'd like to see something definitive, saying outright that you can prove something. Because if it was definitive, you wouldn't even be having a question about it. There would be, you'd have the news. What could you do? But I just think it's not definitive. I just think so. And, I don't know. I don't trust Brazil's government. I'm not going to pretend like Brazil and the U.S. are the same thing. They say other right-wing media figures joined Bannon and Jones in pushing a false stolen election narrative, including conservative activist Matthew Tierman and Stop the Steal organizer Ali Alexander. They say on Sunday evening, Bannon and Tierman appeared on Getter Live to discuss the results as they came in. Tierman repeatedly asserted that the vote totals had been altered, arguing that the trends were mathematically impossible. Tierman relied on an apparent misuse of Benford's law, a mathematical rule that conservatives also use to sow doubt about the 2020 election in the United States. So this law states that in naturally occurring systems, you will see more ones than twos, more twos than threes, more threes than fours, more fours than fives, more fives than six. You get it? The most frequently occurring numbers will be like 1, 2, and then 9 is much more rare. When looking at the math, they say, hey, wait a minute, this violates that. Sorry, I got to be honest. Interesting, but I'm not convinced it proves anything. We went through a global lockdown, global pandemic. By all means, I think you can bring these things up. And I think if this is enough, if people feel strongly about this, then what we need is actually to see an investigation. We actually need an inquiry. The same thing is true for 2020, as I would say for Brazil. What you need is an audit. We didn't get anything good or definitive. We had the one audit in Arizona, and that just disappeared. Hey, guys, remember that? The information that came out from the audit was almost identical to the information that we got previously. A lot of questions, suspect circumstances, and nothing definitive. And I'll tell you why. You know what I really think? Again, I don't know enough about Brazil, so I'm trying to be very careful here. But I think politics is dirty. Fact. So I think what we end up seeing is procedural and manipulation campaigns. I don't think we have fake ballots. I think people on the right are being set up so they can't figure out how they lost. I think when it comes to Donald Trump, you had 97% or whatever of news being negative. You had tons of normies who thought they were cool and posting videos of themselves dropping their mail-in ballots and voting for Biden. They didn't know anything about politics, and now they're suffering because of it. The end result is 2022 is going to be a red wave, and 2024 is probably going to bring Trump back because you can't trick the people, cause suffering, and then expect to hold out in the long run. The machine is dying. Here's what I think. You know what probably happened in Brazil, as so with the United States? Procedural efforts and scummy politics. The shadow campaigns to save the election. Now, by all means, you can call that whatever you want. You can call it cheating or rigged or whatever you want to call it. The reality is, in the U.S., and I would assume in Brazil, I don't know, again, being very careful, you have like voting in the park. You have, what's another really good example? Vote by mail, universal mail-in voting are the obvious ones. State legislatures challenging executives like governors changing voting rules. But in the end, the ballots come from real people. That's it. Now, are you upset that someone went to a nursing home and told all of the old people to vote? Okay. Is ballot harvesting illegal in that state? And you have to be very careful about what these people do, because it's not illegal to go to a nursing home and ask people to vote. It is illegal in some places to collect the ballot for them. But this is the thing, man. You go to a nursing home. Did you vote? Did you vote? Fill it out. Fill it out. That's right. Fill it out. Fill it. There you go. Now put it in the envelope. Drop it in the box. Someone will come and pick up the box for mail-in votes. It is not hard. What I try telling a lot of these Trump supporters, you got to understand, in a city, 2 activists can knock on hundreds of doors by just walking 10 feet. You go into an apartment complex in New York, 30 stories tall. and you knock on a door. Did you vote? It's right there. You go to the next door. Did you vote? It's right there. You go to the next door. For conservatives in the rural areas, you can't do that. Now, there is this big story out of Florida about a ballot harvesting scheme that is ongoing. We'll see, man. If we can't get hard evidence and politicians to clean things up, I don't know what to tell you. The system will eventually just break. Which brings me to the most important point, because I hit rehashing 2020. With what's happening in Brazil, we are seeing violence in the streets. We are seeing fires, roadblocks. Ultimately, I tell you this. I personally don't know if the most pressing thing is how or who won. What matters is we're having this breakdown inside our countries, Brazil and the U.S., and there's nothing to solve it. If the Republicans win next week, you think Democrats are just going to smile? Oh, they're going to riot like crazy. And I don't mean immediately, who knows? But they're going to get super angry. They're going to claim the Republicans cheated. And then we'll see how social media handles their election denial. They're going to come out and they're going to say, you know what the media is going to do? Right now, they're saying election deniers. After the midterms, when the Democrats, presumably, who knows, maybe they'll lose. If they do lose, the media is going, and they're going to say the Republicans cheated and we all know it. And then if you come out and say, stop denying the election, they're going to say you're a fraud denier. Or they're going to say that you're a supporter of election manipulation. They're going to change the narrative and say, well, we know that the Republicans did X, Y, and Z. I know this because Stacey Abrams says it. Because she comes out and says the election was stolen. Because Hillary Clinton says the election was stolen. And they don't ever get punished. Hillary Clinton still says it. So you mean to tell me, if you go on YouTube and make certain claims about the 2020 election, they'll ban you. But if you make claims about the 2016 election with Hillary Clinton, you're fine. That's the way the game works. Ladies and gentlemen, I really do believe in the United States, this midterm election may be the last election. I do. I mean, there will be elections, don't get me wrong. What I mean to say is this. With a revelation from The Intercept that the Department of Homeland Security is involved in a conspiracy with big tech to censor and manipulate and manufacture consent, if the Republicans do not win next week, the Democrats will solidify their manipulation and their campaign. The government will continue its efforts of public manipulation, censorship, and control. And then you won't really know what's happening anymore. If you believe in freedom and you think you deserve to know what's really happening in the world, then you need to get out and you need to vote Republican. You know what? I'm just going to say it. And not because I like the Republicans, but because the Democrats have been in this system for a long time. Now, a lot of these Republicans are bad. The establishment rhinos, terrible. But at least you have a fighting chance if some MAGA Republicans get in and are able to actually subpoena, start inquiries, have committee hearings. Maybe then we can dismantle this machine. Now, Luke makes an interesting point. If the machine exists, allowing the government to manipulate public perception, why would the Republicans give it up? He said it's the ring of Sauron. The one ring. Yeah, fair point. They would get into office, and many of them would say, censorship, it is a gift to us to fight our enemies with. And then you'll have some like Thomas Massey being like, you cannot wield it. No one can. And it will fall on deaf ears, perhaps. Or maybe there will be a strong fellowship to hold the committee hearings to dismantle government manipulation in big tech. We'll see. What's happening now in Brazil, it's interesting. The riots and the protests. Will Bolsonaro go the route of Trump and just say, look, I lost, and try and run again later? I don't know. Considering there are riots all throughout the country, I'm not sure that would actually do anything to save the country. Well, you call them riots, call them whatever you want. I mean, there's fires in the street. They're blocking highways. It's a variety of things. If Bolsonaro concedes, it looks like his supporters will not accept this. So it doesn't matter. I'll tell you this. I think the rioting is wrong. I think the violence is wrong. I think blocking the highways is, well, there you go. I think it's nonviolent civil disobedience, and we have to respect it. But if There is no peaceful solution to the issues here. Does Brazil fall into civil war? I don't know, my friends. I don't have all the answers. But some people have said we are facing a global civil war. And that's interesting. I'm not so convinced. I mean, in Europe, you do have some conflict, but for the most part, what? Well, Europeans are just rolling over and going, and they're accepting it. You know, the high gas prices, the shortages of fuel, inflation rates. People are going to vote for John Fetterman. People voted for Joe Biden. They will put in a broken individual because they hate you. Now, most of the people are just really dumb. So how do you break through to these people? Man, I wish I had all the answers. I really do, but I do not. All I can do is go on the internet and complain in front of a camera. Hopefully people wise up to what's going on, and that's all we can really hope for. We'll see what happens in Brazil. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.